Hi, and welcome to the first video blog or video book review for strollthroughthesouth.com. The first book we decided to review on our site and on YouTube is Go Set A Watchman by Harper Lee. And unless you live under a rock, you have probably heard about Go Set A Watchman in the last month or so. There's been some controversy surrounding this book, and you probably also know that this is a sequel to Kill a Mockingbird, the very popular classic book. This book actually picks up with the main character, Scout Finch, and she's mostly referred to as Jean Louise now that she's older in the second book, coming home to Macomb. She's 26 at the time. I will be honest with you, it had been a long time since I read To Kill a Mockingbird. I think it was 9th or 10th grade. It was assigned reading, like it probably was for many of you. And I'm almost 30, so you do the math. I decided to go back and read at least the first half of To Kill a Mockingbird. I didn't read the whole thing, just to kind of refresh my memory and remind me, the backstory with the characters and the writing and everything. And it was helpful. I did feel like it enriched my reading experience with Go Set A Watchman. However, if you don't have time to go back and read To Kill a Mockingbird, or you've never read it, this is still a good book, and it can stand on its own. It's not a book where you have to know all the backstory. It does help, but you don't have to know the whole backstory to enjoy it, or just go rent the movie. So if you are like me and you don't remember most of it, like I said, it's helpful. At least go read the synopsis online. But this book starts off with Scout, or Jean Louise, being 26 years old. She's on her way home from New York City to fictional Macomb, Alabama. I love that she goes through Montgomery, which is my hometown. Harper Lee was actually from Monroeville, Alabama. So a lot of similarities there. She's 26 years old, and she's picked up at the train station by a man named Henry Clinton, who is kind of a possible love interest for her in the book. We don't really know a lot about Henry from To Kill a Mockingbird. He, I guess, was gone during the summers, but he is an old childhood family friend and now works for her father. And I really enjoyed their story. It's interesting. He's a well-written character, and their interactions were fun to read. But what I really love about Harper Lee is her storytelling ability and her character descriptions. She did such a good job describing Henry, her aunt Alexandra, who also comes into the picture, and her uncle Jack. I love the description of her aunt Alexandra. She's just kind of this old school Southern lady who is the opposite of Jean Louise, and their interactions are also quite humorous. She has a way of taking small town Southern life in the mid-1950s and adding the humor to it with funny little stories in the way she just kind of described her life. There's a lot of flashbacks to her childhood for those who did love To Kill a Mockingbird, and her adolescence, with some really funny scenarios with her brother and Dill, her childhood friend. Just to give you one little description that I thought was kind of funny, she's talking about the Baptist preacher and all their revivals. Her and Jim and Dill even have like a little, revival they put on themselves, which is really quite humorous. But she says, Reverend Moorhead was a tall, sad man with a stoop and a tendency to give his sermons startling titles. Would you speak to Jesus if you met him on the street? Reverend Moorhead doubted that you could even if you wanted to, because Jesus probably spoke Aramaic. I just thought that was a cute little line. But there's a million great lines like that in the book. And growing up in the South, I just found it really comforting, and I enjoyed just hearing her little phrases and things that I kind of heard from a different generation when I was growing up. However, midway through the book, it does get a little more serious. If you have heard anything about the book, you know that we learned that Atticus is a part of this somewhat racist group, or, you would have to call them racist. It's the city council's group, and Jean Louise discovers this. And the discovery kind of sends her into a tailspin, like it would anybody. It's very sad and gut-wrenching to see her have to come to grips with that. And I felt like, it kind of represented that time in our life we've all had where our childhood hero, maybe it was a parent, a grandparent, someone that you thought was untouchable, you figured out they were human, which happens to everyone at some point. And that's kind of just becoming an adult. It's coming of age. It's learning to reconcile reality with our ideals. So my favorite part of the book is that Jean Louise really learns to have her own ideals and comes into herself. It's a coming of age story about her, more than it really is about Atticus. And that part was really sad to discover. I kind of could have done without knowing that Atticus Finch had racist tendencies. But, it is part of the whole story. And as an adult, I can really respect it. I can appreciate it. And I feel like there was still a lot of wisdom in this book. Obviously it was very forward-thinking, probably at the time on Harper Lee's part, but there are things that are said regarding race relations and things like that that probably would not be said now in our politically correct society, so do take that with a grain of salt and understand that going into the book. This was written in a totally different time. For instance, there are different phrases that we just would not use today, so know that going into it. But, I felt like I learned a lot just from reading it. I got to see into a different time period. I got to listen to some really good writing. And the last couple chapters, there are so many great little wisdom tidbits. I was underlining like crazy. The last few chapters, I will warn you, pretty emotionally draining. There's a lot of passion, especially on Jean Louise's part, and you feel like you've just been put through a blender almost when they're over, and it ends kind of abruptly. But I felt like the ending was overall, conclusive. It was satisfying, but it was pretty quick. So I will say my favorite part, her Uncle Jack in the last couple chapters has all these little phrases or things he says that are just full of little wisdom and tidbits to me. He says right here, for instance, this afternoon, this is Jack speaking to Jean Louise, this afternoon I tried to give you some help in a roundabout way, to make it easy for you, to give you some insight, to soften it a little. To soften what, Uncle Jack? To soften your coming into this world. And that's kind of the theme of the book. It's Jean Louise coming into the world, learning to stand on her own. He also says to her, every man's an island, every man's a watchman, your conscience is your watchman. That's kind of where the title of the book comes from. And one more quote, I just keep having to add them in there. But, he's talking about Jean Louise's attitude, and he says, you could think, I don't like the way these people do, so I have no time for them. You better take time for them, honey, otherwise you'll never grow. So to me, the main point of the book is, you can't run from your problems. You can't run from your past. We all have to grow and learn to interact with people whose ideals or views are different than our own. I am wiser for reading Go Set A Watchman. I would definitely recommend it. It's a fast read. I'm a slow reader, and if I can finish it as fast as I did, anyone can read it. I finished it in just a few sittings. Take the time to go find it on Amazon and follow our blog on strollthroughthesouth.com. Thank you.